Hiya, George from Estarli here, and today we're going to talk about some routine maintenance checks that you need to be doing on your e-cargo bike. So we're going to start off at the rear of the bike, and the purpose of this is that you want to be checking your brakes periodically, and there's a few things that you need to check here. First of all, if you have a look, there's a couple of mounting bolts here which you can reach with a ball-ended Allen key. These should generally be tight, but you do want to periodically check them, I'd say once a month. You've also got these two bolts here which will also need to be checked periodically to make sure that they're tight. They're not something that generally work loose, but it's always good to have a check. There's a lot of bike to stop here, so it's always imperative to make sure that you keep them in full working order. Another thing you want to be checking is just to make sure that your rotors, your braking surface is nice and clean. It's generally best practice to leave these alone as they are, but you just want to make sure that there's no oily residue or anything like that on the rotors that are going to harm your braking performance while riding. Another thing you want to be checking is your brake pads, and make sure that there is a gap on both sides of the rotors just there. You should be able to see a little bit of daylight either side of those. It can often help as well to put a sheet of white paper underneath the brake caliper to help you better see the gap in between them. Okay, so I'm just going to be looking directly down from above here, and what I'm going to do at the same time is just spin the wheel, and also while I'm doing this making sure that the disc is completely straight and that it's not going from side to side. Again, it's quite difficult to pick this up on the camera, but this is how you want to be doing the check. And it's not something you should really ever need to adjust, but it's always best practice to know what condition your brakes are in at all times. Okay, well, we're still on the subject of the brakes. The other one you want to be checking is your front. Slightly different, but you've got two bolts here that bolt it directly into the fork, so there's nothing that slides backwards and forwards on these. Once again, you just want to make sure that these bolts are nice and tight and that the brake caliper's fully central. If for whatever reason the caliper's not central, what you can do is you can loosen these two bolts off, squeeze the brake really hard, and while you're squeezing the brake, just nip those bolts back up, and that should re-centralise the caliper again. Other than that, that's the only other check you really need to make. Another thing you want to be checking while you're still on the subject of the brakes is the levers. Much like the previous videos on the E20 and on the E28, just want to make sure that the lever stroke is happening at about the halfway mark. Any more than that would suggest that the brake pads are starting to wear out, or that there's a little bit of air in the system. But that is exactly how they should feel. And again, same on the other side. Just want to be making sure it's at about the 50% mark. These are hydraulic brakes, so they do self-adjust as the pads wear down. But you'll notice when the pads get to a certain point that the lever will be coming very close to the handlebar. So you want to make sure, if that is the case, to get the pads inspected by a shop and possibly replaced if they are running low. While we're here at the front end, another thing you definitely want to be checking periodically is that your light connections are all correct and that your lights are powering up as and when they should. Both the front and rear lights on this bike are hardwired in. So to turn the lights on and off, you just hold down the light button, which is this top button here on your display. And after a couple of seconds of holding it, the lights should both power on at the same time. Another thing that you need to check frequently is your tyres, and there's a few things you can check on your tyres. Number one, and probably the most important, is your tyre pressures. And you'll see here on the side of these tyres, it's actually got a minimum and a maximum pressure suggested here. It's generally well advised that you keep it somewhere in between these two numbers. So on this tyre, it's between 30 and 65 psi, as you can see there. You don't want it to drop below 30 and you don't want it to go above 65, but different people will have different preferences. It's advised to start at 65 and then work your way down if you find the ride a little bit too harsh, but just don't let too much air out. That's something that you want to check periodically once a month just to make sure that they're in the right range. Another thing you can look at as well is your tread pattern. So as your tyres wear down, your tread pattern will start to become a bit more smoother. This is what a brand new tyre looks like. As you'll use the tyres and as they wear out, you'll notice that you'll get flat spots along the tyre and the tread will become less visible until it's eventually no longer there. And also you want to be checking the sidewalls periodically around here just to make sure that there's no cracking, no signs of perishing rubber or anything like that. These are pretty hard-wearing and robust tyres, but it's something, again, it's the main contact point that you have between the bike and the road, and it's probably the hardest working part of the bike, so one that you definitely want to keep on top of. Make sure as well that you can't see any debris, any thorns or bits of glass or flint trapped in the tyre. If you see those, then pick them out as soon as possible, and that will keep your tyres in optimum condition for as long as possible. So another thing you want to be doing is checking your stanchions, which are these parts here. They generally don't need any lubrication, but they do need to be kept clean and dry. If you get any sort of water on there, you want to get rid of that as soon as possible so that it doesn't develop into rust. They're quite well sealed, so nothing makes it generally inside the suspension fork, but it's a good idea if you're out on a wet ride or you've been on salty roads to just give them a clean with a microfiber cloth at the end, and that's about all you need to worry about with those. You don't need to do anything else to them. Certainly no lubricant is needed. They will be smooth as possible. Okay, so moving on to the bolt check now, and something that not a lot of people are aware of are that these bolts here, the couplers that allow you to remove and refit a belt, can work their way loose after a little while. So what you want to do is check these once a month. We do put thread lock on these before we send them out, and we do torque them up, but you just want to make sure that they're not working their way loose. If you ever hear any creaking or any knocking from your bike, these are probably the first and most important bolts to check. You definitely don't want them coming loose at all. And then while you've got this is just a 4mm Allen key. Once you've made sure that they're sufficiently tight, you can also go around and check the other bolts on the bike, such as the mudguard mounts, the footrest mounts here. And again, shouldn't really work their way loose, but it's just a good thing to check and get in the habit of checking, just so that you're not caught out. Same again on the mounting bolts just there. So while we're down here, another check that you just want to have a periodic look at is your gear cables, where they go in there. Now, the main thing that you're looking for on these gear cables is that there's no corrosion. So you just give the gear a gentle twist and make sure that there's no fraying or no corrosion or no rust on any of those wires there. And they should feel quite smooth to operate. That's all you're really looking for there, and you just want to make sure that your fixings are in place as well and that nothing's worked its way loose. So that's how it should look when everything's correctly attached. The last thing you really want to be checking on this periodically is your folding lever just here. So this has a catch which you can lift up and then push to open out. Don't be alarmed if it feels a little bit stiff, it should do, and the reason for that is just because you don't want that coming loose while you're riding. And then periodically, just inside here where you see these little joins and pivots, just want to put a little drop of oil. You don't need to go too excessive with this, less is more. And then just open and close it a few times to work the oil in, and that'll keep everything nice and smooth. While you've got it open as well, just check all the contact points and make sure there's no corrosion or bits of grit building up in these areas here where the clamp actually clamps down and does its job. And while you've got this front end here, also check these two bolts on the side just to make sure that they're sufficiently tight as well. Okay, just close up. It's exactly the same in reverse. And you see the clamp there will close and lock itself in. And as you close it up, you close it until you hear the click, and it should just leave a very light imprint temporarily on your palm so that you know that it's at the right tension. So I'll just do that again so you can see. And that should disappear after a few seconds. And also, something that's worth mentioning is that these two little bolts here, there's one on either side. It's also worth just checking those periodically to make sure that they're nice and tight. You don't want one of those rattling out, otherwise you'll be missing a lever, and that's no fun for anybody. Okay, so hope you enjoyed the maintenance video on the Cargo. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you've got any questions, then let us know in the comments. Thanks.